Feel glad to see you.
Yeah.
Both of you.
I'll mute you.
Pardon? Thank you.
I'll mute us just for the beginning.
Yeah, sweet. Thank you. Hello, Danitsla. And hello, Luke. Welcome.
Thank you, sister. Glad to be here with you again.
Thank you, Danitsya, for your message in the chat. Welcome, Leslie. Welcome, Annie Elizabeth. I feel joy to see you.
Hey, Nicole.
Leslie.
Happy to be here.
Thank you. I'm going to give people another couple of minutes to settle in, arrive. And as you will have seen coming in, I'm recording this call because I've had many people let me know that they can't make it at this specific time, but they really want to see what's happening here. And I'm gonna go ahead. There might be people coming in later, but I don't want to wait. I've been feeling this juicy fear since I woke up and realized it's the day for this talk. I've noticed myself telling the people close to me that this talk is really a milestone for me. It is a culmination, really, of decades of my life's work. It goes back so far that one day I want to tell the story about that, because I think it's a legend. It really is. But this talk is about the most recent chapter of this legend, and I feel so much joy that Annie Elizabeth Hobson is here because it was really something that she invented that made it possible for me to kind of like arrive at this place where and be in this space and experiment with it, and then kind of take this massive like retrospective view of my personal journey and have so many things all come into focus. And this is, yeah, so Annie Elizabeth, part of this is your legend. And yeah, you might be wondering already, what did Annie Elizabeth invent that was so monumental for me? Annie Elizabeth invented something called the EHP Dojo. And EHP stands for Emotional Healing Process. And this is capital EHP. How many people here have done capital EHP emotional healing processes in the style or using the context distinctions of possibility management and conscious feelings work? You know, if you could put hands up, yeah. I mean, I know some have, and then there are emotional healing processes which you might capitalize too because they're a big deal, and maybe they're not necessarily using the distinctions that are offered in the context of possibility management, which puts capital letters on conscious feelings work also. This is used by people who have attended trainings like Expand the Box and Possibility Labs, which have been offered for a long time and that are really still, like, I think one of the Earth's best kept secrets. And it's not a secret, but It's as if it is. And this brings to mind so many mystic trainings that I have engaged in over the years where there's a lot of secrecy. And how I personally think it's going right now is that the secrets are coming out of the box because it's time for humanity to wake up and grow up. And these processes of waking and growing up require these ancient secrets to be brought to the wider collective. And it's my experience that the emotional healing process dojo is like an energetic as well as a physical space that can exist anywhere by choosing, by people who know how it goes and have experimented with how it goes, making it happen and taking a stand for making it happen and taking a stand for the distinctions and maps and processes and tools that can be used in an EHP dojo to reach more people. And this was one of my clues about, oh, this EHP dojo thing, this is about my purpose for being alive. I have so long noticed that in modern culture, when you have mental or emotional illness and your friends and family aren't enough, the doorway you have is to the mental health system. And I've walked through that doorway myself personally several times, and I have found a lot missing in those spaces. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it or that it's bad. It's just how it is right now, or how it has been. And it's changing, and I've noticed changes about that. But it always kind of lingered like it pulled at me in the back of my mind that what was missing, what was missing was not stuff that you can really learn at school. And yet the people holding space in these mental health spaces, they learned from school. They went to the halls of higher learning, academia, to become therapists, counselors, even when it's in a volunteer level, like people in call centers for like suicide support. A lot of these people, they're trained, and honestly, I think some of these people must be some of the biggest edge workers that are still really engaging in modern culture spaces, to be able to have the clarity to put themselves as a volunteer on the end of a suicide crisis phone line. And I know a lot of these people are people who are doing volunteer work because they were trained in academic spaces. And I'm really here to take a stand for the extraordinary space holding, the skills and capacities of the people who are training in more of a healers healing healers context. And this is anyone who wants to be a healer. It's not someone who's gone and done a bunch of training and is calling themselves a capital H healer, because even the word healer is sometimes one that I shy away from, because I feel scared that this whole thing about personal authority being given away might happen. And is anyone else here recovering from being in the habit of giving away your personal authority? Yeah, I mean, if you were born and raised in modern culture, you are, my suspicion is that you are in recovery from having been raised to give your personal authority away, no matter how well-meaning and attentive and present any of the grown-ups in your world as you grew up were. It's just so deeply embedded into the current humans to give their authority away or take authority, let others rather give authority to them, because no one can give your authority away, and no one can stop you from keeping it. But there are these these patterns embedded in us that are really about giving our authority away. And in the skills and tools, distinctions and maps of conscious feelings work in possibility management are the best I have ever found. And I've been searching since I was 14 years old. And I'm 51 now. That's a pretty long time. And I have gone into all kinds of what I would now call game worlds, where different teachings, I mentioned my mystic dabblings, which were pretty significant. I've been into so many different kinds of spaces where there are distinctions being given, and they're being given by teachers and healers. And even in this space, this call is actually not a space where really collaboration will be happening. Most of what I offer in the world are collaborative spaces, because I'm there to experiment and to learn myself. But in this context of this call, I'm really here to deliver something, to land some things. And we won't probably be doing experimenting unless my archetypal lineage is like, do this experiment. And I feel scared about this because I don't actually find those delivery spaces very alive. And in order to kind of handle that, I just want to make it clear that this is this space today. Okay. Yeah, I do actually have an experiment I want to bring, and that is to do what I call centering, in order to bring our energetic and actual authority back into the center of ourselves. So many of you probably have ways that you do this already, and I'll talk one through so that you can experiment with this one. So with your eyes open or closed, you can just bring your attention to your physical body. You can scan, maybe track a few points inside your physical body. Just notice it. Changes might happen. You might choose to make some changes in your physical body. And then intentionally move your attention onto the part of your physical body that's between your hips and between the front and back of your body, right deep down there in your pelvic area. And just really focus on that part of your physical body as the center of your physical body. And then keep a little bit of attention there, but now kind of blast your attention, your awareness outward again, and look for your energetic body. How big is it? Where are the edges of it? Where has it gone? And as you're aware, probably our energy goes where our attention goes. So energy follows attention. And there are probably things, people, places, memories, worries that you've given your attention to, and your energy has started to flow there. And this is your chance to take that and bring it back. For me, it's a little bit like reeling in a fishing net. It's like, instead of being flat and wide, it's like multidimensional. And bring the edges of that fishing net into a kind of ball in front of you. And notice as you start to become more present in this small here and now. And when you've got your energy, your attention in a ball, then use your intention to shift and move it onto your physical center. And this creates the energetic experience of being centered, or being more centered perhaps than you would otherwise be. And using this experiment over and over and over builds your capacity and ability to have your center, become recentered, and to ever more often be more centered. Thank you. There are several more steps to coming into what I call, as a possibility manager, first position. And we're not going to go into those today. But what I will ask that you keep a little bit of your attention on your center as we continue here today, just to notice when it kind of bursts out or is pulled, when your attention is pulled to somewhere and your energy starts to flow there too. And just, it's not a problem. You're not doing anything wrong if that happens. It simply, again, it has consequences. And if you want the consequence of being centered in your own authority, you can just pull it back. All right. In my preamble for this talk, I noticed that, and in sending the invitation out, I noticed that I was able to send the invitation for this talk to everybody that I know. I mean, there were some people I didn't think would be interested, and there were some people I didn't have time to send it to. And when I considered people, I was like, oh yeah, it's for them too, it's for them too, it's for them too. And this does again go back to my experiment results, my research results, about how I have become more and more able especially over the last 20 months, to handle my life. And I've been able to more effectively handle my life because I am feeling my feelings more distinctly and at lower levels of intensity. And there's another big thing about this, which is that I am also not feeling so intensely, so constantly, so regularly, so clutteredly my emotions. And the difference that I hold between emotions and feelings is that feelings are about what's happening in the here and now. They are in the here and now. Whereas emotions are about the past. They are feelings that happened in the past and did not get processed. So the energy and information that those feelings had for us long ago was not made available. And it's my suspicion that life wants us to have the energy and information from all of our feelings and from the feelings we had in the past that we didn't get the energy and information from in the past. And emotional healing processes make this possible. If that's not extraordinary enough, emotional healing processes make something else also possible. In the past, when I was, for example, a little girl, and I started having a lot of feelings about something that was happening, and the people in my world were not able to hold space for me, I made decisions kind of explain my life to myself. Some of the decisions I made were that it was not okay for me to feel my feelings. This was a huge decision. I probably made it hundreds, perhaps of thousands of times, that it's not okay for me to feel my feelings. And I would swallow, and I would pretend, and I would deny, and I would act as if they weren't happening. And I made this decision over and over and over, and it became part of my mimetic structure, part of my mental body. Now, sometimes I would also have the experience that it was okay to feel my feelings, that it worked. The people around me didn't punish me or abandon me. I could feel my feelings. So I also had, it was almost like I had this conscious mimetics that said it's okay to feel my feelings, but it's as if it was taped on top of, it's not okay to feel my feelings. Really, when it came down to it, there had to be so many conditions in place for that it's okay to feel my feelings to actually be the mimetics that prevailed. And generally, my default decision was it is not okay. This meant that even as a quite sensitive person, I've walked around ever since with this, don't feel your feelings, don't feel it, nope, not here, no. And it kicks in unconsciously. And learning to catch it has been, the practice of especially these last 20 months. In order to change that deep mimetic that says it's not okay for me to feel my feelings, what it took for me was to go into the doorway, to go into a huge emotion, to use a huge emotion as a doorway. And honestly, it doesn't have to be a huge emotion. Nowadays, my doorways are smaller and smaller, more and more subtle, because they're just these huge emotions have been seen to. There's been this massive house cleaning over these last 2 years where a lot of the emotions that were more obvious and more recurring, and they were like beach balls that I was trying to hold under the water of a swimming pool. And I just, everywhere I went, the beach balls would come up, especially when I was trying to relate to someone, I really cared about. And it started to seem like they weren't getting me. Does anyone have that experience? Yeah. So using emotions as doorways to old unconscious decisions, so that that mimetic that's been emblazoned in me for decades can actually be rewired, is, to me, the most extraordinary thing on the planet. And again, in my opinion, the thing that I think that humans on Earth right now need most in order to have different consequences happen. And emotional healing process dojos, what they are to me is they are spaces, again, energetic spaces, and they can be physical spaces too, where anyone can go to have space held for them to do an emotional healing process. I would like to show you my personal EHP Dojo. Ta-da! When you're in it, a lot of my EHP Dojo space time is done over Zoom. In order to set up my physical space as an EHP Dojo, I get my water, I get my fancy tissue, I get a couple of hand towels, I get a barf bucket, and I get my beat book and pen. My beat book is a book that I carry with me at all times. I even have started to bring it into the bathroom because I've been known to get something in the shower that I want to write down because it'll be lost if I don't. What are these things for? I mean, the tissue's pretty obvious. The water may be obvious, and just the amounts of it maybe are surprisingly more than a person might think. Emotional healing is thirsty work. A lot of people kind of are like, I don't really get the towel thing, but what these are used for is to turn up our anger consciously, to use our anger in order to bring our authority back to our emotional healing processes is just one of the roles of anger in emotional healing processes. They also make really great mufflers. So I can be pretty loud and I'm not waking up my housemates. The barf bucket is who's a little scared of this? Anybody a little scared of the barf bucket? Mostly this is a just in case thing, because when my throat starts to open. I mean, who knows? Who has clarity that they have layers and layers and layers and layers of unconscious fear taking over the musculature in their throat, closing it. And that sometimes when that starts to be released, I mean, I've cleared my throat a few times here because my fear comes in and I'm like, okay, blast that out. So the barf bucket is a little more like, you feel my fear, I can handle what's happening more easily when I have a barf bucket handy, because then I know that if I do start to throw up, I'm good. I don't have to be like, what am I going to do? Where am I going to go to throw up? And it's also great for just spitting into, because a lot of what comes out through the from deep down up and out is this gooey, sticky stuff. So if this is brand new to you, I have a fear that people who are new to this are going to be like, fuck, get me out of here. I don't want to be throwing up. I don't care at all if this gives me new mimetics, if it makes all this like handling my life more responsibly possible. Like, I don't want to throw up. Is anyone else have throwing up as one of their least favorite activities about being human? I think throwing up is actually my least favorite activity. I'm sure I could make a longer list, but that would be definitely at the top. So I just want to let you know that it doesn't happen as often, and for some people it doesn't happen for months and months and years and many processes. And this is a perfect segue into what I would call the preparatory part, the preparatory processes and activities and spaces that lead to emotional healing process dojos. Now, I love that, Annie Elizabeth, that you called it a dojo, because for me, a dojo is like, I relate dojo to like martial arts and this whole realm of physical and mental mastery that is gained bit by bit by bit by bit by bit by practicing, by coming back to first position over and over and over. In martial arts, it's a little different than the conscious feelings work, possibility management first position. And maybe it's because it includes so many more energetic distinctions, and it includes the emotional body. Granted, I have never in my life gone for martial arts training. I've had a few tutorials and done a few workshops, but I've never like signed up for martial arts. So I don't know for sure what goes on in a martial arts dojo. And from what I've garnered from the people I've talked to and from the movies I've seen and from some of the codexes that I've seen in martial arts game worlds, that the emotional body of a martial artist is pretty much numbed. There's this cultural and modern culture glorification of the numb hero who maybe squeezes out one tear when his very best friend dies. So this is what I mean about how in most dojo spaces, the emotional body is left out. And in EHP dojo spaces, the emotional body comes back, is allowed in. You don't have to leave your emotions at the door or your feelings. You know, some other ways of saying that are you don't need to leave your soul at the door. You don't need to leave your heart at the door. You don't need to leave what you really, really, really care about on a day-to-day basis at the door. You can bring all of that in to an EHP dojo space. And an EHP dojo is also a space where people warm up to do EHPs. Just like a martial arts dojo, you do your warm-ups, right? You don't necessarily go right into it. Now, this is different than being able to go right into an EHP process once you have done the warm-up work that leads to EHP processes. And what is this warm-up work? So I've mentioned numbness quite a few times, and the first phase of conscious feelings work and the first dojo space that you would go into for emotional healing processes is the phase where really you're getting your feelings back. You're getting your ability to feel even your emotions back. There's a lot of people, have you noticed anyone that you know going around with a lot of emotions really close to the surface? And they say things like, I'm not angry. Yeah, I'm sure someone comes to mind. And so this warm-up space, this phase one of conscious feelings work, has to do with gaining our capacity to feel by lowering our numbness bar, starting to feel in the present and to feel emotions from the past, starting to have the beach balls come up out of the swimming pool. It's like the top of the water of the swimming pool is like keeping us thinking that this up here is life and ourselves, while this under here is like doesn't exist. Now, some of us know perfectly well everything under there does exist. That doesn't necessarily mean that we have clarity about what is under there. And again, using distinctions in terms from possibility management, this is called our underworld. In modern culture, kind of psychology game worlds, this is called our unconscious. It is also there are echoes of it or consequences of it in our physical body. I have been amazed to discover that even though I have always been, I was a dancer and an actor, and I'm a mother, and I was super in touch with my body. I gave birth to 4 kids at home and nursed them, and the most kind of devastating physical injury I've ever had was a broken arm. My emotional and mental injuries have been massive. I've lost a bit of the track of where I was going with that. Oh yes, I have been astonished and delighted to discover how much more physical sensation I have throughout my body from doing more emotional healing processes. It's like, what I think is happening, what my experience tells me is happening, is that my nervous system, my actual nerves, because I'm not numbing my fear, I'm actually letting my fear spread out into my whole nervous system instead of it being compacted and hidden away and tucked away in some like specific places where I was holding it. And this brings like circulation, aliveness, sensation, and this body awareness that even though I thought, if someone had said 2 years ago, where are you on the scale of 1 to 10 for body awareness? I would have been like a 9. Now I'm like, oh, I'm a 9 now. I was more like a 7 before. And this is very handy. This means that I can walk on icy surfaces out here in Canada with more safely. So this is an example of how the bodies are connected. And when the emotional body is nourished and fed and it can come alive, the emotional body can then follow, come more alive. The physical body also changes. The mental, mimetic body, I've talked about also. This is all this, like, we're such like my experience of being human as I use these distinctions of different kinds of bodies, different kinds of food for each body, different kinds of pain in each body, and different remedies for bringing healing to each body. Yeah, like I said, it lights me up. And this is really what I believe I'm here for. And it's not a mental belief. It's like, this is the evidence in my life shows me this is what I'm here for. And if you're here, my suspicion is that it's because you have something in yourself, in your own archetypal lineage, in your own makeup of your being, even if it's boxed in by your mimetic constructs and your patterns, even if it's boxed in by modern culture, you live in a apartment in a city and work in an office or something like that, even with those limitations and those boxes around you, it's my suspicion that your being is here to bring and experience these kinds of things in this lifetime. I keep wanting to bring it back to EHP Dojos, the pathways to get to EHP Dojos so that you can make use of them. But the other thing that I want to talk about, that really this is maybe the core of my passion about this, and the core of why I am so wanting to take a stand about this, goes back to what the legend of Annie Elizabeth creating the EHP Dojo, the first one that existed. And this dojo came to be in the context of the North America Possibilitator training team. This team is a group of people who are using possibility management in their lives for their own personal inner permaculture work, and also in their work that they offer to others. And when the North American team started, there were like 12 people were part of it, and some of you here were part of it. And as time passed and we met every week, it got to be so that people started leaving. And when I was like, how is it possible that in the context of conscious feelings practitioners who are using possibility management, distinctions, tools, maps, and processes, and to collaborate and create together, and we're all so committed to this, how is it that this team is falling apart? And you might relate to a similar kind of like being in this space of like, what the fuck? How did this happen? This man I loved, who I committed my life to, and who's into whose hands I put my 2 young children. How did that fall apart? Like I know I still love him. What happened? My short answer is emotional reactivity happened. Those old emotions under the surface popped up, havoc ensued. I started saying things that I didn't really mean to say or want to say. So did he. And this is kind of what happened even in this next culture team space. Possibility management is full of distinctions that help us pull that kind of happening apart and really get down to how to do things differently. and yet it hadn't really reached this team space. And Annie Elizabeth, in her wisdom, noticed that what everybody seemed to need more of were emotional healing processes. And it occurred to her, I think, if you can correct me if I'm wrong, that if we held space for each other to do more processes, that this would bond us in a way that, maybe bond is the wrong word, it would create closeness. It would create a more tender team field space. And it would also like help us all to kind of maybe slow down and be with each other more effectively. And so she made a proposal that we start to meet not 1 day a week, but 2. And the second space she called an EHP Dojo. And I was one of the people who started to come to the North America Possibilitator training EHP Dojo spaces. And within literally like a small handful of weeks, I'm thinking it was maybe even 3 or 4 weeks, the phenomenon of the EHP Dojo, the wisdom of it, the obvious like workability of it, it just flashed through the possibility management game world. And all of a sudden, Clinton Callahan, the originator of possibility management, created a website. He put Annie Elizabeth in the driver's seat to continue to kind of refine and evolve that website. We had people ask to come to the team dojo space to just like case the joint, come for a few weeks, see how it was done, and then be like, okay, I'm rolling out of this space to create another EHP dojo for my team, my project, people in my time zone, you know, my circle. And it has started to like make its way through the possibility management game world. What I'm taking a stand for is for it to go beyond the edges of the possibility management game world, maybe into game worlds that you've originated, including families, including couple relationships. Can you imagine what would become possible if a new couple who was starting to, you know, explore creating 5-body intimacy together had EHP dojo spaces to go to anytime an emotion came up? Now, this reminds me that sometimes the symptom of an emotion coming up is not this explosive reactivity. Sometimes it's this distancing, calming down, going still, what trauma therapists call freeze. This can start to look like isolation and depression and pretending. And the more EHP warm-up work I have done, the more obvious it is to me when it's these kinds of mixed emotions that maybe are my numbness bar, create my numbness bar. These become the symptoms that I can pick up. That are like, oh, there's an emotional doorway in there somewhere. And sometimes all it takes is for me to have a like 2-minute text conversation with another possibilitator before I start feeling the emotion. It starts bubbling inside me. And then I'm like, got it. I can even then be like, okay, I'm going to write this in my beat book. This is my EHP, my next emotional healing process doorway. I feel scared because people might not show up to my work talk. And I feel scared that I'll make up that it's not important, that I'm not important, my work's not important, that people don't care about me, people don't see me. This is all real life examples that happened in the last 2 years for me, over and over and over. And this is what has really been made it possible for me to be handling my life with my feelings and with these upgraded thoughtware mimetics. So in the weeks and months and years to come, I am making myself available to game world builders so that they can start to learn to lower their numbness star, feel their feelings, feel their emotions, use their emotions as gateways to emotional healing processes, start getting the hang of that with people who are already doing it, and then start to bring their teammates, their family members, their project people, their eco-villagers, their, you know, crazy spaceship passengers to warm-up spaces, find out who's really turned on about this, and especially train those people up, and by doing it with them. This isn't like I'm training you up. This is like we're in training together. By doing emotional healing processes and the maps that make up emotional healing processes. I see your question, Luke. We'll start that soon. In order to establish emotional healing process dojo spaces in people's personal lives, they're, you know, I rent this room in a house. In other spaces I've come to deliver possibility management distinctions and tools to, we have turned a room into an EHP Dojo space. I didn't know that's what it was called at the time. We just called it the healing room. And then, you know, people can come in and out of that, and can come in and out of bigger spaces that are turned into temporary dojo training spaces, so that the side effect of healing together can happen. And this is this closeness, this tenderness, this ability to be so present with each other because you've been there. When you saw that person, you helped navigate with them into their underworld, all of their reactivity starts to become so okay. You know, the gremlins, the reactivity hooks that have come my way from people that used to piss me off and make me want to say things like, fuck you, I'm out of here. The more emotional healing process spaces I've been in with those people, the more I'm like, oh, that's just your gremlin. That's just your emotional reactivity. That's just the unhealed parts of you. No problem. I can hold space for that. And it also means for me that the fear, the emotional fear that I used to have that someone else could not hold space for me is diminished to the point where I can use this subtle, low intensity fear that someone can't hold space for me to set up a sound space where all the person really needs to do is nod and be present. And I navigate. I do the inner navigating. I find the old decision. I make a new decision. It's incredible what becomes possible. Thank you for listening to all of that. And I will shift the space into a Q&A space now. So feel free to, go ahead, Luke.
I honor you and I celebrate you, sister. This is awesome. This is just what we need right now for our populations, communities, and tribes to heal from trauma and shame. So what I want to put out is some potential, like possibility, let's talk about possibility. Dr. Brene Brown's work in shame resilience, Dr. Daniel Fisher's work in emotional CPR. These are potential collaborations, because to just bring somebody onto the streets with emotional CPR training and allow them to be out there as a first responder to people in crisis, that's a big deal. I don't think that, I have full confidence that everybody out there is fully prepared to be able to meet every situation. We're talking possibility management. Yeah, of course. So how do we merge this with the current mental health and emotional health and healing and recovery systems?
Is that your question?
Yeah, I want to be a facilitator to make these connections happen.
Yeah, cool.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, this is a great question. And you know, how do we bring this work into modern culture is basically in a way what you're saying. And I have an answer that might be shocking. My answer is that we don't. We create something different. And we let people who are in modern culture come knocking at our doors about that. And what I don't mean to say is that we don't, if we are a person who's got these skills and is learning and growing in these ways, that we don't take them into the modern culture work that we do. I'm not saying we don't do that. A big part of this work is that, here's a distinction. Emotional healing processes are initiations. Each one of them is an initiation into authentic adulthood. The definition of, or the distinction, initiation, it's something that before it happens compared to after it happens. An initiation is something where after it happens, your ability and capacity to take more radical responsibility increases. This opens up the territory of responsibility. And again, modern culture has a map of responsibility that is not a next culture map. In modern culture, the old map of responsibility says that responsibility is a burden. It means obligation. It means if you don't do a good job, you get punished, you get fired, you get demoted, you get broken up with, abandoned, all these things. It means if you're good at it, you get more and more and more until you have so much responsibility you can't actually do a good job with it. And then you get blamed and fired and, you know, people fall off their pedestals, right? The new map of responsibility is so different from the old map of responsibility that it's like going from a map of the flat world. You know, people could sail off the edge and a monster would eat them, to the map of the spherical world that you can sail around. It is that drastic a shift of thought maps. On the new map of responsibility, responsibility is simply conscious awareness in action. It's about what I can do and what I can't do. And with my conscious awareness, I discern. It's that I become, with radical responsibility, I become responsible for the level of responsibility that's being taken in a space. So this is where this kind of bold statement that says, you know, I don't feed modern culture. It's about creating a new culture. And I do that, first of all, by creating this space, my own personal bubble of space, as a next culture space. You know, I'm living on the edge of a huge metropolis. I'll show you at my window. I have this city, this view of downtown Calgary. And I love it because I'm literally living on the edge of modern culture. In this house that I'm renting here, this room in this house I'm renting, this space here is so much more a next culture space because I'm inhabiting in it and I'm creating it as a next culture space. I did a face, actually, as I was waiting for the time of this call to start, I quickly did this Facebook video. I don't usually get involved in any way in politics. But recently, a friend of mine sent me a survey from the Canadian government. This Canadian government is putting an ear out to Canadians to ask, what do you think we should do to curb human-caused climate instability. This is my word for it. They just call it climate change. So it's about climate action. And the survey I filled out just kept saying, space holding, emotional, mental health, it starts with the individual. When the individual becomes more resilient mentally and emotionally, and probably more physically, as I was describing, tends to happen, then our our ability to relate, collaborate, handle catastrophes and chaos, to have that, again, that center inside ourselves, so that no matter how we're like flying through forest fires and floods, I have my center. I can choose. I can take radical responsibility. I can start to take responsibility for how much responsibility the people with me are able to take. By not being the kind of leader who dictates and forces and demands, but by being the kind of leader who goes first and sets an example that other people can follow so that they can be leaders too. So this is a very different way of, it's also a very different way, EHP Dojo spaces are a very different way of bringing information and energy right into people from their own inner resources. And I'm not saying that books and courses and all of that stuff from these people who have been on the edge of this kind of evolution for humanity around emotions and feelings and the heart, because my experience is that heart becomes the center of my emotional body. Once I have all these beach balls of emotions out from everywhere else, that makes me not even, have clarity about what my emotional body even is. It's just happening, and it's all bigger than me. I got to the point where none of my feelings were bigger than I was. My anger could be, and I was bigger. My fear could be, and I am bigger. My sadness can be, and I'm bigger. I am the space in which these emotions happen, rather than the space that gets completely swept away or blasted or burnt or, catastrophized because of emotion. So yeah, I'm not saying that this kind of academic knowledge and practice that comes from like academic research spaces, I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with them at all. They're great. A lot of that, some of the books you mentioned, some of the people you mentioned have informed my journey as a next culture space holder. What I would warn against is it can be easy, even we're doing it here right now, we're talking about feelings. We're talking about emotions. We're talking about how it can go. We're not feeling necessarily. We're not using our emotions to get information and energy. And this is the radical shift that becomes possible in EHP Dojo spaces with these tools, distinctions, maps, and processes, is that we can stop talking about it and start collaborating. And recently I talked to someone, and I'm smiling a little, my gremlin is like, someone in the room, about how, for example, I spent a lot of time in the nonviolent communication game world. Wonderful, essential for my development. And I do not seek out those spaces any longer, because what I find with NVC is that people talk about their feelings. They say they're having them, but they're talking about them. They're thinking. Thinking is not feeling. And yes, feelings have intelligence and information. This is different from the intelligence of the mental body.
So in response, if you like, very briefly,
So
this is very much complementary to where we're going in this realizing human equivalent mycelial networks endeavor, because the public health system array is above ground.
yeah.
It's visible, it's mind, it's conscious, and the underworld, the mycelial networks are feeling and connectivity. and availability, response, presence together. So in that way, like making this available would be more like a one-to-one, not like well advertised kind of a thing. It'd be like more on the underground, you know. Oh, so you want to take this further? Okay, well, I know about this, you know. I like it.
Yeah. Thank you, Luke.
Thank you.
I love how you really get it. Like the Gaian representation of the tree of life above the ground and the roots underground with the mycelium below the ground and air above the ground. It's like the air is like this mental world, but when you're in both worlds, the upper world and the underworld, and that becomes our middle world where things are happening. This, yeah, it's so much what, you know, what becomes possible. Yeah. And I love how another representation of the upper world, the mycelial network manifesting, to me, is this digital technology that I hope is very temporary. I mean, the more temporary this can be, the happier I will feel, because I know what it costs. I know what it costs Gaia, the second and third world, and future generations that we use this technology. And I, as a radically responsible, or a human oriented in radical responsibility, or originating contexted in radical responsibility, I'm choosing to use technology I know costs the earth and future generations in order to create new results for the earth and future generations. So yeah, a lot comes into play, and I feel scared I might be losing people, and yeah, this is why I would love any more questions you have to come out into the space. And if you're asking a question and I can't hear you, it might be because your microphone's on or off. Okay, well, if anyone gets a question, just you can put your hand up or put something in the chat. So wait, the chat is quite full. I haven't. Tina, hello.
Hi, Nicole. I'm just wondering, are
Oh no.
you spelling responsibility RESPONSE hyphen ability rather than, but I mean, having that as the understanding, but spelling it the traditional way?
Yeah.
Able to respond is what I'm
Yeah.
getting.
This is, I've heard this over and over. I think it's beautiful. It really is about being able to respond rather than to react. And this still can be a person, a culture, a game world can still be on the old map of responsibility about, this is where I did a 5-year experiment in community housing. I originated something called the Awakening House Temporary Permaculture Ashram. And I became a responsible victim in the context of that house, because I still had my parent ego state and my gremlin were still, these parts of my underworld, these parts of my unconscious were still so active that even when I was responding, it was coming from this numbed out place. And it didn't look like reactivity. It looked like responding. It looked like I was able to respond. It still wasn't working. And this is one of the big experiments, these 5 years of my life ending in 2020 that really like fired me up enough that I would use my anger and my sadness and my fear to reach out into the world to find more tools, more distinctions, more maps that work.
Yeah.
They create the results that I want. Yeah.
I love the map. I'm a big metaphor person, so yeah.
There's so many.
I think of it as a metaphor.
Yeah. Yeah. There's
Yeah.
so many delicious maps in possibility management. And speaking of which, for those of you who are newer
Thank you.
or new to, thank you, Tina, to possibility management, there's some really great news. And that is that the distinctions, tools, maps, and processes of possibility management have been there. As a next culture game world, there's not secrecy. There's not paywalls. There's not like access denied because, or there's not this power structure. It is all available online, open source. Anyone can use it. You can even use it to make money. And how it's done is that possibility management has been kind of translated into a massive multiplayer on and offline game called StartOverxyz. And this game is made up of literally hundreds of websites that deliver the theory and then offer experiments that people can do to get the distinctions to land more deeply in their 5 bodies. So that is a resource, and I feel fear as I offer it because it is so big and so huge and has so many rabbit holes in it, like wormholes really, and get sucked into. And I probably spent like 3 or 4 months of 2020 in the early parts of the lockdowns just traveling through rabbit holes, like links to the next website and the next website and the next website. I would have so many open that my computer would start to shake. So this brings me to kind of this last part that I want to do in the next in this last part of this talk, is to offer doorways that are relevant so that you're not kind of going, oh my gosh, here's the StartOverxyz map has hundreds and hundreds of doorways. What would be, my question is, what would be the most bright doorway for you? What is the next doorway that would make sense for you to go into? And this is usually at least partly to do with where you are on the map. Where you are on the map between phase 1 and phase 2 feelings work. And just to be clear, phase 1 is not the first map, and then you move on to phase 2 and you're never on phase 1. It's not how it works. Because phase 1 is all about, phase 1 never ends. There's always less numb to be. There's always a next layer, a next layer, a next layer. The distinction is that in phase 2 of feelings work, you're actually able to use your feelings without them like being hijacked by your emotions and by the parts of yourself that are kind of committed to not taking responsibility, not feeling, staying numb, staying in old patterns. And I mean, this is another extraordinary thing that happens when more processes are done and more experimenting is done, that these parts of ourselves become more and more clear to us. And so they have to resort to trickier and trickier strategies to catch us and to knock us out and to hook us. And we have a team who can be like, hey, I think you got hooked there. And we can be like, oh, thank you, write it down in my beat book instead of, quitting or starting a big fight, making a big mess. And even if we do, we have tools to clean that up.
That's how I relate with this concept of the dojo, sister Nicole. Is in the dojo we are practicing to overcome the enemy within us, ultimately, so that once we get to know these parts of ourself, we are that much more able, equipped, confident to be able to meet that part of ourself beyond this self.
Yeah.
This is where it's at. Thank you.
Oh, you're so welcome. What I'm inspired to do is to yeah, if I had it all my way right now, I would have a conversation with each of you here that was about where you're at on the map and what your next steps are. What are possible next steps for you? And yeah, so I something that I offer are 30-minute one-on-one calls. There's no cost to that except for your attention and your time. And yeah, I offer each of you watching to book in with me, and I will, yeah, I'll set up my link. I'll make sure that I think I'm connected with each of you somehow, and I can send you each a link to my booking calendar, which is, you know, my high-tech way of making this conversation a lot more smooth, or making the steps it takes to get in a Zoom room with each of you a lot more smooth, just by, you know, because my calendar says, here's my gaps, and you look at your gaps and you just book yourself in, and it saves us a lot of back and forth. And I will also share here a few things that I have coming up. One is I'm doing a discovery space holding collaborative team about grief. It's come to my attention that in conversations with several other possibility managers and conscious feelings workers that they make a distinction between emotional sadness, processing emotional sadness, and grief. And I don't make that distinction. And so I really wanted to work with it more and see if I do start getting distinctions, or see if the people who make that distinction start seeing that there isn't a distinction. I don't know how it will go. But one of my other discoveries is that in possibility management, there are a lot of rage clubs. And these are so important because, like with the centering we did at the beginning, getting our authority back, this takes anger. I need low-level anger all the time to hold my center, to hold my bubble, to stay grounded, to stay in connection. Of course, the old map of rage and anger is about breaking connection, about causing harm to people, ourselves, and spaces that break the space. And that's, again, this is a way that reactivity happens, and people leave or abandon or go back inside themselves to this like unreachable place. There are rage clubs. There are also fear clubs, and fear clubs is like a new invention in the last year. Places where we're doing similar with discovering our fear and really getting it back, like I described, getting it back into our whole nervous system instead of packing it away. And also getting out of this old map of fear thing. It's so prevalent right now in the world. Oh, fear, love, not fear, as if fear isn't part of love. And there's some amazing work about that being done, and lots of fear clubs. And it's very recent that I ever heard anyone start to talk about creating some kind of sadness club, or a space where sadness is happening. Ooh, Luke, I see your question, shame club. This is a great point, because this is where distinctions really come into play from conscious feeling work. The distinction about shame is that shame is actually a mixed feeling. It is usually like, maybe you could even do this right now. You could like turn up your shame, like really like magnify, like find some shame and magnify it so you can really, really experience it. And just notice how much of it is anger, sadness, fear, or joy. The distinction that follows this is that feelings and emotions are most useful in their pure form. The possibility this creates is that I can use my anger about my shame to unmix it, and then I can feel each of the sadness, joy, fear, and anger distinctly and get the information from them. And what I've discovered is that don't walk around with all this emotional shame anymore. I can feel a flash of shame, like, oops, I fucked up. But then then with the distinction, I can be like, instead of like swallowing that, I can be like, ooh, I feel scared because I might have broken connection. I feel angry because, and then I can handle what would previously have been like another shame milestone becomes like like almost a springboard for radical relating. Yeah. And then, yeah, you see how this could work better for families, couples, teams, projects, eco-villages, game worlds everywhere. Thank you for that question. So juicy.
I would like to be involved if that comes about as well. There.
Cool.
Facilitate the bridge possibly as well.
Yeah.
Brene Brown.
Yeah. It's echoed in a lot of different edge workers coming out of a lot of different game worlds. So the sadness offering that I'm doing is called Good Grief, and right now I'm like reaching out to people who are experienced in holding space for grief or sadness, and creating a kind of level of team from which then will emerge the next level of team. This kind of first level of team will be people who become part of a kind of council for the offering, really that become an EHP Dojo doorways for participants, for me, as we go through this together, in case there's more space holding needed than there is space to hold it. And then the next layer will be all of these people helping to find the people for whom this offering is their next step. So that's in the works, and how you can tap into that there are two ways really to connect with my work as it emerges. One is to become a Patreon, which is you can pay as little as $1 a month, and as much as I have patrons who have paid me $400 a month for a time. I've some at 50, 20. My friend Emma put it really sweetly. She said, I imagine that if we lived in the same city, I would take you out for tea or breakfast at least once a month to catch up with you. This way I give you the money that tea or breakfast would cost, and I get to hear from you every week. And then we have calls, at wider intervals, or patrons can then be like often the first to know about what's coming in terms of offerings, and can sign up and can ask questions, can have more of a conversation. And then the other way is to sign up through my website for my newsletter. And the newsletter comes up about once a month, but every now and then an extra newsletter comes out because something suddenly appeared and is being sent out. So those are two great ways to kind of be in the receiving position for other offerings. The 30-minute call, no cost, is of course another offering. The other standing offer is to book in for an emotional healing process. An emotional healing process might not actually happen, depending on how accessible, how your capacity and ability to navigate into emotions. It might at first be what's called more of a possibility coaching, which tends to be more about mimetics and structures, and then starting to be able to tap into this underworld, emotional world, and start to get openings there. I also have a few offers that I hold space for regularly, and I don't have any of these upcoming right now. I'm just finishing a Rage Club. I'm just on the home stretch of a 7-week Rage Club for women. I also offer something called Money Club, and in Money Club, what we really go into primarily is how the opposite of scarcity or poverty is not abundance, it's creation. And when we start to create and bring value to the world, this is when abundance starts to be, again, a byproduct rather than what we're going for. Just like emotional healing processing, dojo, and space holding creates this byproduct of connected community, creation, and creates the byproduct of abundance. So that's the territory we explore in Money Club. I also, am part of a few different teams that meet every week that people might be interested in. And again, you hear more about this through my newsletters and Patreon. And if anybody wants a rage club or a money club or another kind of thing about any of it, thank you. I'm always, how I work is more of a responder. I respond to requests, and rather than initiating things, this was a response to lots of different questions I was getting this call, and that tends to be how it goes. So yes, an open invitation to reach out for and ask for what you want, and we can create something about that together. Are there any more questions? Thank you, Luke. And also, is there anything anyone wants to say before this space closes in about 8 minutes?
Yeah, I wanted to say thank you, Nicole, for sharing so much about what brought you in and how you're using the tools, and I see changes in you from when I first met you. That is exciting to me and inspiring. And I'm happy that you're offering such a variety of things that I know are all important to you. And there was some other thought I had. I like the idea that you are initiating a variety of things, but then you're really clear about waiting, also being open for invitation to for people to say what they want, and then you can work with that. And I love that as a way to be in the world. It's a great offering to know that you're available, and people can approach you and to say it, like in this. So I wanted to say all that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Leslie.
I guess I have one practical question. Is this going to be is it going to be an hour and a half? Is it going to be where we split into 2s and 3s? Are we going to coach each other? Are we going to, what does it look like?
Do you mean the series?
Yeah.
Thank you for asking. Yeah, the calls will probably be an hour and a half each week with a Telegram group in between where people can share about their experiments. The calls will be, I mean, the first one and the last one will be a little bit different from each other, but the two in between will be, you know, a check-in, like how's your week gone as you've been applying these new, maybe new to people, or I mean, they might be new to some people, but their distinctions have a way of kind of like being ever new, like they continue to land more deeply in all our bodies as we experiment. And so this, it'll be like, how's your week gone about your grief, about your sadness, about your experiments, and then what the check-in kind of, the check-in helps me notice the necessity in the space, and then usually there's some kind of experimenting with the necessity, so that things where people are stuck or snagged or have questions about can be worked with. And then the last part of each week call will probably be like, what is your next, what are you going to do during the week as you continue to experiment and really work with these new distinctions. And
You mentioned grief. Were you telling me about the grief group? I meant
yeah.
about the dojo.
Oh, the dojo. Oh, wow. Yeah, I didn't get that in. So what a dojo space is, and the dojo continuing the awakening house, or the awakening the village Monday dojo, which usually happens during the same time block that we're in right now with this call, Mondays from 10 a.m. Mountain time, is ongoingly a place where people who are either doing warm-up work or doing full-out emotional healing processes already, who are in phase 2 of feelings work, can come. And how it will go, and this is laid out in Annie Elizabeth's EHP Dojo website, how it goes is everyone arrives, gets into first position, does a check-in about how much time do you have today, and do you want to hold space and or have space held for you, and then people are matched up and they go into breakout rooms, and then when they're done in their breakout room, they come back into the shared dojo space, and often no one's there because people are either still in their breakout room or they came out early and then they left. But it's like the doorway out. And then in the Telegram group for this particular dojo, people share their gold. So they might write a bit about, especially after they've kind of processed the process, say, wow, the gold of my process was I found this old decision, I made this new decision, and the experiment I'm going to do this week is this, about getting it deeper in. What I'm asking is that if people want to be part of the dojo, that they commit that they'll be there for at least four weeks in a row, and then it'll kind of maybe refresh each month. And if people are leaving the dojo, the request is to replace yourself, find someone to bring into the dojo. You can be doing that anytime, but before you kind of leave the dojo group, that you at least replace yourself with one other person. And yeah, in a way, it's the rules of Fight Club apply, except opposite. Instead of don't talk about Fight Club, it's talk about it. Tell everyone about it.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And thank you for bearing with me through my answering a different question.
That's all right. Naide.
Hello, Naide.
Hello, Leslie and Nicole, and Maria and Val.
I'm going to officially close this space since it's 11:30, and I'm available to stay on for a little bit longer. But for those who are watching the recording, thank you for watching. And the 30-minute call applies to you too, and I'll post the link to my Calendly booking app for anyone who wants to have a 30-minute call with me and about next steps and about possibilities for yourself, your relationships, your families, your projects, your communities, your eco-villages.